Welcome back to Reviews and Rankings with Robby Sobel, and today is the day. We are through Camp Crystal Lake and we have landed in a very interesting place. A place I've been looking forward to since the very start of our hike through Crystal Lake, and that is in 1993, with a very special review for Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, was directed by Adam Marcus and stars John D. LeMay, Carrie Keegan, Stephen Williams, and Kane Hodder. Alright guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we take a look at Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. Now, just a quick little rewind. A few months back, I was contacted by Brett over at Good Real Hunting to take part in this giant Friday the 13th collaboration. I kind of misunderstood him, and I thought he was asking me to contribute just one review. Like maybe he'd get a whole bunch of channels together, and each channel would review one particular film in the Friday the 13th franchise. Little did I know that I had agreed to take on and review every single entry in this series. It's been a lot of work, but I'm happy that it worked out that way. I've made some new friends along the way, strengthened bonds with already existing friends, and added new subscribers who are checking out the channel and enjoying the content that is getting dropped, not just with the Friday the 13th reviews, but some of the other work that I put out there as well. And as a reminder, of course, I'm not the only camper who is hiking through Crystal Lake. I got a bunch of my friends who were doing it as well, dropping their reviews each Friday for the next sequel in the franchise. You can check out their links in the description below, and you can check out their pretty old faces right here. So remember, after you watch this review, give them a shot. It might be the same movie, but it's a totally different perspective, and it's one that I highly recommend, and it's worth giving it a watch. Alright guys, so back in 1989, Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan came out, and once again it continued the downward spiral of the Friday the 13th franchise in regards to critical consensus, audience consensus, and most importantly, the box office. The budget for Jason Takes Manhattan was just around $5 million, and it brought in only around $14 million at the box office. That's roughly about 3 times its budget, which is usually considered somewhat of a success, but the trajectory of this franchise has been going south, and that's a really bad turnaround. At this point, Paramount Pictures was done with Jason. They were thrown in the machete. Just a few years later, they sold the rights to New Line Cinema. And that's where we end up now. It's 1993, and a new Friday the 13th film is being released. Now, New Line didn't have the rights to the actual Friday the 13th title. That's legal mumbo jumbo I'm not going to bore you with, but they did own the rights to the character of Jason. So instead of a Friday the 13th above the title, we simply get Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. Co-writer and director Adam Marcus was in his early 20s when he came up with the idea and put it on screen for all of us to view, and it's a little bit different. Now, I'm not going to BS you. A lot of people do not like this film. In fact, there's a ton of people who are fans of the Friday the 13th franchise who loathe this film. Myself, I'm not one of them. It's different. This is what I tell everybody when a conversation comes up about Friday the 13th and Jason Goes to Hell and kind of my defense of it. If you're a fan of comic books, you probably know the term a one-shot or an Elseworld story. Basically what these are stories or little novels or a comic that take place out of the canonized story. So let's say you are reading Batman comic and you have Batman and he's got his main storyline, and then someone comes up with this side Batman comic. And it has nothing to do with that normal, standard, traditional story. It's just kind of over here doing its own thing, almost like a what if. And whatever happens in that what if Elseworld one-shot, it doesn't affect the current timeline, it's just its own special little thing. Anything after Part 8 in the Paramount series of films in the Friday the 13th series should be looked at as a one-shot Elseworld story. If you look at it that way and you don't compare it to what really was before it, I think you can really have a lot of fun with it. Now, Adam Marcus was clearly a fan of Sam Raimi's Evil Dead films. The Necronomicon is even in Jason Goes to Hell. Adam Marcus has confirmed it in interviews since the release of the film that Jason is essentially a deadite. The creature and the character and the undead that was fighting Ash through a bunch of these Evil Dead films and all through the Ash vs. Evil Dead TV series that wrapped up just a couple of years ago. It's an interesting take, and I think if you look at it that way, as opposed to just being another Friday the 13th film, you might be able to enjoy it. Maybe not a whole lot, but a little bit more than you already do. Now the story is pretty simple. We see a very voluptuous woman travel to Camp Crystal Lake in a cabin. The power goes out, she's hunted down by Jason, she runs out of the cabin, but this is not just any old big-breasted fat-assed girl at the camp. She's actually an undercover agent, and she lured Jason out to be surrounded by dozens and dozens of SWAT members who unload on him with bullet after bullet after bullet until he explodes into the air. The only thing we see is a faint beat of Jason's heart. And before we cut from that big epic opening scene, we get the smile of a man named Creighton Duke, who's a bounty hunter who's looking to take out Jason. He doesn't seem convinced that the SWAT team members have done it, despite the fact that Jason has been blown to pieces. But that comes into play later. Fast forward just a bit, and we are introduced to Steven, whose girlfriend is named Jessica. And as we learn, Jason is actually her uncle. Her mother, Diana, is Jason's sister, and the only way that Jason can fully come back to life is by taking over the body of someone in his bloodline. Jason is being examined at the morgue by the coroner, who gets a odd urge to bite into that once beating heart of Jason. And once he does, Jason's soul and evil enters him. Jason becomes almost a body hopper. But those bodies don't last too long, and the only sustainable body he can find is that of his own family member, which comes into play when he's looking for Diana and Jessica, and Steven is there in an attempt to try to save the day. Creighton Duke, of course, is that bounty hunter who comes along and helps, and without getting too much into the plot of the story, this is just so much fun. It's bonkers. It is crazy. And I get how people could be turned off of it because it's nothing like the 8 films we got prior. But think about that. It's nothing like the 8 films we got prior. Do you want another film that is just like that? I didn't. Going through this series and watching these films each week, I still have fun with most of them simply because of nostalgia. But man, getting to the end of this road here has been a little bit difficult. You can see why people were burnt out and we needed a change. Now, was this the change that a lot of people would have liked? Maybe not, but you know what? I dug it. I thought it was a very interesting way to kind of tweak and play around with the Jason mythology, especially once again doing it in a one-shot Elseworld story that really is just its own thing over here. This is kind of like an expensive fan film. Adam Marcus clearly was a big fan of Friday the 13th and the horror genre in general, and he gave to us his vision, and I'm happy that he did. Now, typically over the last few years, I would throw Jason Goes to Hell on. It would be background noise while I did some laundry or cleaned up the house a bit. But I watched it this time again with a more critical eye, and I can see why people have issues with it. There's some plot holes, and there's some inconsistencies, and there's a few things that actually bother me just as a fan of the franchise. Something as simple as the Voorhees home is spelled incorrectly. After 8 films, you figured you'd get the name Voorhees correct, but I guess that's kind of nitpicking, and if I'm really gonna use that as an example of something I didn't like in the film, the movie can't be too bad. Like I said, it's bonkers, but it's a good kind of bonkers. This is a lot of fun. There's some good gore in it, and the film is shot well. It looks like a professional film. It doesn't look like a low-budget entry, direct-to-video or DVD type of movie. It looks like a good, professionally shot film, and for something this far into a franchise, the 9th entry into a horror franchise, you have to be appreciative of that. I mean, there's so many of our big horror franchises that by the time you get into the later sequels, they just don't look good. They look cheap and cheesy, and it's so obvious that they're just trying to slap a title on the cover just to sell a few tickets and get a couple of extra rentals at the video store. Now, of course, Kane Hodder returns, this time for his 3rd appearance as Jason. Now, we don't get him as much in this film. Like I said, after he was blown up in the beginning, Jason becomes almost a body hopper. So we see those actors who are possessed by Jason playing Jason just as they are. There are a few different times where we can kind of play around with that, where someone looks into the mirror and sees a reflection of Jason himself with the hockey mask. But as far as the look of Jason goes, when I first saw it when I was younger, I wasn't a big fan of it because Jason's head almost looks like it's bubbled over the mask, and it looks like his mask has become part of his head. But as the years have gone on, I can kind of appreciate that. He looks big and stocky. He looks like someone who's gone through it. And you know what? After 8 films, now into the 9th, he has gone through it. And Kane Hodder does a really nice job when he's on screen. And you know what? The mannerisms of the other actors who have to play the Jason role, I think they're stellar. I believe when I'm watching the screen that Jason is inside those actors and inside those bodies, and that's what you were hoping for, and I think that's what we got. Kane Hodder here with his 3rd time playing Jason. I know people would like to see him a little bit more, but what we did get from him was solid, and the performances of the other actors who were inhabiting Jason did a good job as well. Something I really loved about this movie, they have almost like a family atmosphere at this local diner, and they are trying to make money off the death of Jason, and they have these 2-for-1 burger patties, and the main lady there ends up taking one burger patty and takes beef out of it to create a hockey mask face, and then with that remaining beef just makes a second patty. So she's ripping her customers off, but it's absolutely hilarious, and it's totally something that a company would do to save a couple of bucks while trying to look creative, especially a local diner that's probably, not making a ton of money and just looking for a way to cut costs in a creative way. That whole family is very, very fun. There's her husband, who's this like short dude. He's kind of like a stick of dynamite, and she's got either her son or her younger brother, who's another heavy set guy, and he's got a lot of energy in him. They're really memorable characters, and I think it's just absolutely fantastic and love it. Now, I'll tell you, I'm happy that the focus was on Steven as the final guy, because Jessica as a final girl was kind of annoying. Her husband in this is named Robert. He's really a sleazeball. He's a host of this kind of America's Most Wanted show, and we learn a little bit later on that he's only dating and trying to be with Jessica because of her potential bloodline and how it might be able to help his career. He's a skis-ball, and she's just annoying, where Steven seems like a guy who's really just a cool dude. So the fact that they focused on Steven more, who's a much more likable character, is something I appreciate. If they shifted it more and focused it on Jessica, I think my enjoyment of the film would go down, just because she's not very likable. Like I said, she's a bit annoying, and if that's where your focus is going to be, that would be a negative, but thankfully it's shifted to Steven. The ending of the film, listen, this is absolutely epic. We get a fight between Jason and Steven and Jessica. Jessica grabs a family heirloom, so to speak, in the form of a giant dagger, stabs Jason through the heart, and he is pulled into hell by these kind of gargoyle-looking demons. Now, that's a cool ending, but that's not what everybody remembers. Now, when this movie came out in '93, I was about 8 years old or so I actually didn't see this, I think, until probably a year or two later when it was rented on VHS, but I remember kids talking about it in school, and I wasn't even sure if I should believe them, because in elementary school, kids are just making up stories. Who knows if they're telling the truth? But the ending is of Jason's mask lying on the ground, and then, because they are now owned by New Line Cinema, Freddy Krueger's glove reaches up from hell and drags Jason's mask down with him. This teased a potential Freddy vs. Jason movie 10 years before we actually got that film. This was something that was hugely memorable, and it was big in all the magazines like Fangoria, and it was a hot topic among us horror fans as kids, and I'm sure with everybody else in addition. Alright guys, it is my favorite part of these reviews. Now typically I do a Coolest Kill and a Deadliest Diva segment back to back. But this time I'm gonna merge them together and then tell you a story. When I first saw this film, like I said, I was probably about 10 or 11 years old, and I remember bits and pieces of it from back then, and I enjoyed it. But I remember buying the VHS myself when I was 13 years old, going into ninth grade, I believe. It was around 8th grade, heading into ninth grade. And I remember watching this movie over and over and over again, particularly one scene. Now at 13, this was back in 1998-ish or so, I guess. My memory is going. But around 1998, things were a little different. You couldn't just go on the computer and access any website that you wanted to. You couldn't just turn on, a late night spicy porn channel. Those were very difficult to come by back then, especially if you didn't have access to the premium channels. So because I was just dealing with AOL 2.5 and basic cable, and as a 13-year-old boy who was starting to come into his own and be a little extra curious, this film got the job done for me on more than one occasion. So my deadliest diva and coolest kill is going to focus solely on the greatest kill, not just in this film, but the best kill in the entire Friday the 13th franchise. There's no debating that. I won't even engage in a discussion over that because this is it. The tent scene in this one. Now, the tent scene is interesting because this wasn't even originally in the script. New Line wanted more TNA and they wanted more blood and guts. As we've talked about in previous reviews in the Friday the 13th franchise, there's 3 things that you need to make a successful slasher film. It's fun and relatable characters, it's TNA, and it's good blood, guts, and gore. And I'll tell you, those 2 major ones, the blood and the guts, the good kills, and the TNA are in this scene. Now there's a character of Luke and a character of Debbie, along with one of their other friends. They're camping on the grounds of Crystal Lake, and Luke and Debbie decide to go into a tent. On the outside, Jason kills their friend, while Luke and Debbie get it in. This is a very popular scene. This is one that I hold near and dear to me. I wore out this VHS as I was exploring my own sexual desires as a young boy. I have no shame in admitting that this is something that I knew exactly where it was on the tape. I knew exactly where to play. I knew exactly where the kill was going to come in, where I would stop and then rewind and just rewatch. There was like a good 2.5 minutes that I was able to view here, and it sounds silly. I don't mind putting myself out there. I watched it endlessly. Now, the cool thing and funny thing that I found out many years later during the Crystal Lake Memories documentary, the actor and the actress who played Luke and Debbie had dated previously and only broke up a few weeks before shooting, and then they had to take part in a very intense and graphic sex scene. Imagine how awkward that is. You end up breaking up and then you have to do a sex scene with your ex. That is pretty rough, particularly on the person who ended the relationship in the first place. This is a graphic sex scene. My deadliest diva, without question, is going to Debbie. I'll tell you, I know a lot of people might not think that she's like a perfect 10 out of 10. She's a little bit basic in some areas, but she's super cute. Clearly, she likes to have fun. And for helping me become the man that I am today, Debbie, 10 out of 10 for you. Thank you. Mwah. 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 The famous line that Luke shot out to her, "Are you ready for Tony, the Wonder Llama?" Debbie was ready, and for that, she gets the Deadliest Diva Award. But why don't we just, for the hell of it, no pun intended, look at Rotten Tomatoes. The Rotten Tomatoes score here for Jason Goes to Hell, a critic score of 16%, and the audience score not much better, 24%. Clearly, the critics and the audience are morons. I'm just kidding. I know everyone has their own opinion. I'm just fucking with you. Clearly, this is not what fans were looking for in a Friday the 13th film. I get it. I totally understand. I enjoy it despite this. This one did a little better at the box office with a budget of around $3 million. It brought in about $16 million, which is better than Jason Takes Manhattan and much better than Jason X that was released many years later, but still not that great. Due to the critics and the audience not being a fan of this, we had to wait a decade for Freddy vs. Jason. But When it comes to Jason Goes to Hell, it's something that, on a more serious note, I enjoy. I think it's a solid film. It's not a great movie, I'm not going to say that, but it's a fun entry. And like I said, if you look at it differently, if you look at it as kind of that one-shot story over here, almost kind of like a well-made fan film, I think you can have fun with it. There's a lot in here to enjoy. So for Jason Goes to Hell, Final Friday, I'm going to say that the film itself is a pretty solid 3 out of 5 star rating. But for me, personally, this reaches heights that few films have ever reached in regards to impacting me as a person and as a teenager. So I just want to give a special thank you to Adam Marcus, to the actor and the actresses who played Luke, and of course Debbie, and everyone else involved, Kane Hodder. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, from my hormones and my sexual curiosity as a teenager. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I can never repay you, but if you ever watch this video, I hope you know that I'm speaking from the heart. Thank you. Alright guys, so what did you think of Jason Goes to Hell? Are you in the majority and pretty much think this movie is awful? Or are you like me and have a little bit of fun with it? Whatever your thoughts are, leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, you can hit like, and if you loved it, you can subscribe. Remember, hit me up on Instagram and Twitter at RankingsRS. So thanks for checking out the channels, guys, and keep watching movies.